IELTS Writing Task 1 Academic Band 9. I'm going to show you how to write a Band 9 answer using a multi-chart type of task from Cambridge Book 14. This means it's a very recent test paper using the latest test specifications. This task was requested by one of my loyal fans, Peter, who commented in one of my videos that he'd like to see this type of task explained. Now, if you would like to have a video made, please write in the comments section what you'd like me to make a video on. Also, I hope that you stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to share with you something really interesting that I only discovered at the end of writing this task and making this video. I suddenly had this realization about, wow, this can be done so much better. And I want to share that tip with you at the end of this video. Alright, so this is the task that we're going to be using today to write our IELTS academic report. And as you can see, it's a combination task. We've got our bar graph up the top, bar chart up the top, and below this we've got a table. So we can call this a multi-task type because there's two different types of charts here. And now you can see the full instructions on the screen. So what we want to do is have a quick look at what's there. We can see there's a bar chart. We can see that there's 2 years. We can see different categories. And in the table, we can note that it's about percentages. And below the bar graph, we've got a table. The bar graph is showing exports in billions of dollars for 5 different categories. And then the table is the same sort of information, the same years, but it's showing the percentage increases. Okay, so we're going to have to deal with the dollar values and the percentage increases for the same 5 categories. So it's worth just having a quick glance and trying to make sense of all the information. And then we can have a look at the detailed introduction, which we're going to have to paraphrase when we write our task. So let's have a look at the task introduction. Let's just underline some of the key words so that we can start to think about how we might paraphrase them. Okay, so we've got, let's just put the task back on as well. Okay, so let's paraphrase some of the key words from this. So we've got the chart below. Don't copy the word below because the chart's not going to be below on your test paper. Shows the value, maybe value could be important. Of one country's exports in various categories during 2015 and 2016. The table shows the percentage change in each category of exports in 2016 compared with 2015. Okay, so I've underlined what I think are some of the key words in here that we're going to want to paraphrase and introduce in our report. So let's have a look at how we can rephrase some of the given words. Country, we can talk about a nation. Okay, this is a useful rephrase. It's useful for your essays as well. This word country comes up a lot. Export earnings, we can talk about earnings from exports, just exports, sales abroad. Petroleum products, oil, crude oil, oil-based products. A bit of an error there. Engineered goods, we can talk about manufactured products. Gems and jewelry, precious stones and jewels, agricultural products, farm produce, farm products. After doing the paraphrase, you're going to want to have a good look at the chart and think about what things you're going to cover in the chart. And you're also going to want to think about how you're going to cover the data. And we always want to find a way to split the data. So we've got a couple of options here if we want to split our data. One way to split the data would be by chart type. So we have a paragraph about the first chart, a paragraph about the second chart. This often works really well with multiple task types. However, it doesn't work particularly well with this task. The reason why it doesn't work well with this task is because essentially this table is showing the amounts and this one's showing the changes, and it's going to be better to kind of combine these two tasks together when we're reporting the data. The problem is if we write about this chart and then come onto this chart, we're going to have to repeat a lot of the same sentences. So here where we're just, and we might even repeat some information when we're describing this, if we talk about the starting level and the finishing level, well, it just makes sense to mention the percentage at the same time. So I don't think this is a good example of where you'd want to cover chart. Now, if we compare it with this chart here, this chart is it's a good idea to go paragraph. So a paragraph for each chart because there's different information. This one's showing causes of land degradation, and this one's on the regions in which it's happening. So this is a good example where you would have paragraph for the pie chart, paragraph for the table. Okay, so a second option could be to recognize that we have two different time periods and cover it by time periods, and I think that this would work really well. So we'd have a paragraph for 2015 and then another paragraph for 2016. So that would be a nice, easy way to write it. Again, I don't think it's the absolute best way, however. The way that I'm going to cover it and the way that I think this task works best is to cover the two highest categories and then the three lowest categories. So that's what you're going to see in this video here. I'll just sort of circle them so you can see what it is I'm talking about. So I'm going to have, so what I'm proposing is I'm going to have a paragraph with these two categories and then a paragraph with these three paragraphs in them. And while I'm covering these, the percentages are going to get covered. So when I'm mentioning these, in come the percentages, and same over here. It's really important that you think of the structure before you start writing. It's going to influence a lot of things. It's going to influence how well you cover the data. It's going to influence how well you structure your report. Okay, so we've sorted out that we're going to have two body paragraphs. Let's see what we're going to talk about in each paragraph. So the first thing, when we're looking at this first body paragraph, the first thing that's going to be interesting is that these are all about the same level. There's not any huge differences in them. So we're going to be talking about that. The other thing that's maybe interesting is that both of them are increasing. This one increases a bit more. We can see it's a bigger increase. This is confirmed in here. We actually get the information for that from here. So we can see here petroleum increased by 3%, whereas the engineered goods increased at a higher rate. So we might want to just mention that over here, that this is a higher rate. And then when we come over to our next paragraph, we're going to mention that these are much lower. The levels are much, these two are almost the same, but these are much lower. So we're going to want to mention that. We're going to want to mention that all of these categories over here, so all of these categories over here, much lower than they are over here. We're going to want to mention that. We're going to want to mention that this is the we're going to want to mention that this is the only decrease. We've got slight increase here, very little, and a bigger increase. And again, this information can come from here. The precise percentages can come out of our table. We're going to want to note that here we have the lowest, and this one's the highest. Lowest rate of increase. Highest rate of increase. And then that's basically our plan, and once we've done our plan, we can come on to actually write our report. By the way, I'd recommend that you do exactly what I've just done in your real test. Write all over your paper. You're allowed to. There's no rule against writing on the task instruction paper, and you won't be handing that in with your report. The examiner's not going to see it. So it only makes sense to me to make a thorough plan before you start writing. Why? It will save you time, because you won't have to keep stopping to think about what you're going to say next. 2, it will lead to a better result, because you're going to have a more accurate description of the data because you've made a plan. Okay, so let's now move on to actually writing this report and see how we can write it. So the first thing that we've got to do at the start of writing our report is to paraphrase the instructions that we're given. Now, it's extremely important to paraphrase given words. This is because the examiner is going to be looking for this. They're going to be looking to see whether you can paraphrase given words when they read the introduction to your report. It doesn't matter so much in the body of the report. It's critical. This is where the examiner is looking for it. So this is where you want to show your best rephrases of the given words. Okay, so let's see what I'm writing for this one. So you can see the instructions here on your screen. These are some of the words I paraphrased before. Here's what I'm writing to introduce this task. The bar chart illustrates a nation's exports by category in 2015 and 2016. And the table gives the changes and exports for each category on a percentage basis during the same period. Overall, all categories increased except for precious stones and jewelry. Now, I should just mention a few things about this overall summary, especially since this is the most important sentence of this whole report. Let me tell you how I got this overall summary and why I chose it. So really, for the overall summary, we're trying to summarize all the data for all the categories for both years, and this can be quite tricky, and it also depends on the structure that you've picked to cover in your task. I've decided to have a paragraph about the highest categories and then on to the lower categories. So the body of the essay is focusing on the relative levels. So in this case, it's a good idea for the overall summary to be not so much focusing on the overall levels, but the changes. And for me, the change in the numbers is what's most interesting here. Basically, what we've got is we've got 4 categories have increased, and then only 1 is decreased. Okay, so that's what I've based my overall summary on for these 5 categories for both years. 4 of them have increases, and then only 1 of them has a decrease. So for me, that's the most important and interesting thing about this report, is that 1 of the categories decreased. Now, if you wanted to add another sentence, or you wanted something different, you could instead talk about something different. You could mention the highest category and the lowest category. So that's another way to do your overall summary. I would probably use that as my overall summary if I instead had decided to go by year, then I might be looking to talk about the highest and lowest. So I'm going to mention all of the categories increased except for one, which decreased. And then if you wanted to, if you felt you wanted another sentence, you could mention the highest and lowest. The reason why I'm not doing that is that's coming out in the body of the essay, and I don't want to have an overall summary that simply gets repeated. So I think this is the best overall summary. 4 of the categories increased and 1 of them decreased. It summarizes the data nicely and succinctly. Okay, so that's the introduction written for our report, and let's see how many words. 42 words so far of our 150 words. That's another reason why I didn't write the highest and lowest categories in here. It'd be nice to, it'd be great to have that as well, but it could start to blow your word limit a little bit, and consequently you might run out of time. Okay, so that's the introduction for this report. Note too that I've got the overall summary in here. This is the best place for it. You can put it as another paragraph, but then it's a very sort of a 1-sentence paragraph. Don't really like it. You can put it at the end of your report. Again, it'll be a 1-sentence paragraph. I think this is the best place to put your overall summary. Now we're going to go on to body paragraph 2, or actually paragraph 2, body paragraph 1. And this is where we're going to be talking about these 2 categories. Maybe we'll just put these on the paper. Okay, so body paragraph 1, we're going to describe the first 2 categories. And remember, I'm covering the percentages as well. You can't see the percentages on the screen, but I can't show everything, unfortunately. Now, we want to start the paragraph with a signal to the reader of what our paragraph is about. So we want to describe the top 2 exports. So my first few words are going to reflect this. The top 2 exports, which were oil-based goods and engineered products, had similar sales volumes. So this sentence gives the reader quite a bit of information. First of all, we're telling the reader that we're talking about the top 2 exports. We're telling the reader what these were, and we're telling them that not only were these the top 2, but they also had similar sales volumes. Okay, so there's a lot of information in that first sentence. Let's now move on and describe the first category. Petroleum products increased slightly by 3% from $60 billion in 2015 to about $62 billion in 2016. Now, note the use of language of approximation here. Now, this is because we can't determine what the exact level is. I suppose we could do maths of 3% on 60 billion. Don't waste your time doing maths. And what if you get it wrong anyway? So that's a waste of time to do maths. So just say about 62 billion. We can't see exactly what it is. The other thing that I've done is I've modified my verb. I haven't just said it increased. I've said it increased slightly. And that's because next I'm going to talk about this larger increase. So again, there's a lot of information in this sentence. Now let's have a look at the engineered goods. Engineered goods increased at a faster rate of 8.5% from about $58 billion in 2015 to approximately $61 billion in 2016. So we've communicated some important information to the reader. Not only have we said that the engineered goods increased, we've used a comparative, a faster rate. We've put that rate in. And again, language of approximation, because this number is not exact. neither is this one, so we've used about and approximately. There's other words. Maybe I could change this one to roughly, since I've already used about. It's not really going to matter that much. There's no rule like, wow, you can't use a word more than once or something. So if I wanted, let's just change it to roughly. Slight improvement to our report. Okay, so that's the end of that paragraph, and now we can move on to the next paragraph. And in this paragraph, we're going to be describing the other three categories and how they were much lower. The other three categories had much lower export values. Okay, so we've communicated important information, the much lower export values. Let's now describe the first category. Gems and jewellery recorded the only decline, with sales of about 42 billion in 2015, declining by about 5% in 2016. Okay, so we've got important information, only decline. This is highlighting. This is called highlighting information. It's important for getting to higher scores. Now, I've put in the start figure and the increase. I'm not really required to also mention the end number for every category. Okay, so I haven't mentioned the end number here. I could quite easily, I suppose. I could just write 2 and then whatever the level is. The reason why I haven't done it is to save time and to save words. The reason I haven't done it is so that I can write less and save time. I'm trying to show you how to write these in as few words as possible. And it's the highlighting that's important. And by not sort of mentioning information that's not really that needed, it helps the highlights to stand out. An intelligent reader can figure out, okay, it was 2 billion in the beginning, another 5% in 2016. If they really want to know the end figure, they can work it out. But I mean, we could add it in if we wanted to. What I'm really trying to say is it's not essential information. It's not essential that you put every single piece of data in there. You want the important data, you want the highlights. Sometimes you're going to have 20 pieces of data. You can't cover every single piece of data. It's the highlights that matter and the essential pieces of information. Okay, let's now look at our second category. Farming products were $30 billion in 2015 and had only a slight increase of 0.81%. Okay, so we've got slight increase. So we've got slight increase, so again modifying our verb is helpful. So we've got slight increase, and this helps, modifying our verb helps to add precision. It also helps to communicate the information to the reader more effectively. I guess if I wanted to, I could also mention that the level is much lower than for gems and jewelry. I don't think it's that important. We already know that these are the bottom three categories. So again, you have to be selective about what you're going to say, otherwise you'll never get this report finished in 20 minutes. So I'm trying to show you what are the key pieces of information and how to highlight information. Let's look at our last category, textiles. The greatest increase of over 15% was for textiles, which increased from approximately 25 billion to over 30 billion. Okay, so highlight the greatest increase. These highlights are what matter. These are what really impress the examiner. These are what get you to 9. This is why most people can't get to 9, because they cover the data in a very mechanical way of just mentioning what the amounts are, what the percentages are, what the years are, but this is really what matters to the reader. So we can see some important information. We can know what increased the most out of the 5 categories. Okay, and then that's it. There's no need to write anything more. There's no conclusion for a report. Let me just say it again, there's no conclusion, there's no concluding paragraph, unlike the essays. So finally what we have is a completed report, 160 words for this report. That means we can comfortably write it within 20 minutes, including all our planning and our paraphrasing that we did at the beginning. Okay, that's why we don't want to write too many words, because it'll be hard to do the task in the approximately 20 minutes that you're given. And another reason why you don't want it to be too long is because that means you're including too many details and your highlights are not going to pop out. In this report, our highlights pop out. Let's have a look at some of our highlights in here. We've got some excellent highlights. Our overall summary, all categories increased except for. Okay, so we know that all of the categories increased except for one, and that was precious stones and jewelry. Another highlight, top 2 exports. We know what our top 2 exports are, and then we can find out the other ones quite easily. We know that the ones we're mentioning in this paragraph are not the top 2, they're the bottom 3. Okay, we're reinforcing this point about gems having the only decline, and we also know what increased the most, what had the greatest increase. So for me, these are the important pieces of information. The top 2 exports, the other 3, which one declined and which one increased the most. And this is why this can get to 9, because of the level of highlighting. It's very hard to get to 9 otherwise. What are some other things that we like about this essay? Let's talk about what I'm talking about here with the highlights is the task response. How about our cohesion and coherence? Our overall structure is excellent. We've got 3 paragraphs. We've divided our data into 2, which is extremely helpful to the reader. So they know we've got the top 2 exports here, the other 3 here. Then in terms of lexical resource, we've shown some ability to paraphrase in our first sentence with things like nations and precious stones and jewelry here. We've shown we can use more precision, which helps our task response. It also helps our score for vocabulary. Rather than just saying everything increased, we've got increased slightly here, and then we've got a comparative here, increased at a faster rate. So we're showing the examiner we can use language. We can stick adverbs with our verbs. We can use comparatives. We can paraphrase, shown up here. And the other thing we're showing is that we can use language of approximation. Roughly, approximately. This helps the task response as well. It helps vocabulary, it helps task response. And then finally, grammar. Have these commas, if you're wondering what's going on and why we've got all these commas here, what I've just highlighted here, this by category, is what's called a parenthetical element. We can remove that from the sentence and still leave a complete sentence. And when we have parenthetical elements, we can use commas to offset them. I've used a semicolon here. This is like a super comma, a big comma, and that is to show the reader that this part is different to this part. So we've got a whole bunch of commas going on in the sentence. We put a semicolon here, which is like a big comma. You can think of it that way, to show the reader how the information sequenced. That this is one half of it and this is the other half. Here, the use of which relative pronoun helps our grammar. Why? Because it helps form a complex sentence, and this is what the examiner's looking for under grammar. They're looking for complex sentences. Complex sentences have a dependent clause and an independent clause. Again, another relative pronoun down here, again being used to add extra information about the subject. The other thing to note is that I'm using a variety of sentence patterns. With these earlier sentences, I've got the categories first. Let's just underline these so you can see. category, category. And then what I do here is I don't put the category first. And this ends up in a different grammatical structure. Okay, so I avoided the temptation of just starting every sentence with the category so that I can show a range of sentence types to the examiner, which is critical for getting to 9. Just not making mistakes is not enough. You must have a range of sentence types. Okay, so the big discovery or realization that I had by the end of writing this task and also while making the video was that there was something very simple that could be done to make it so much easier to write this task. And what that is to actually take this information from below, from the table, and copy it onto the bar chart. And I would do this on your test paper as well. So by writing these percentages up here, we no longer need to look at the table below, and it simplifies everything. So what I've done, and let's use as an example petroleum products, is I've taken this percentage, 3%, and just written it up here. Okay, so we copy all of the values up here, and then this has a few advantages. We no longer need to look at our table, so we can just ignore that. The other thing is it just allows us to see things more clearly and also to cover our data more easily. Remember that I've got paragraphs structured like this, so this just makes the task of writing this paragraph and this paragraph so much easier. Okay, so that's something that I learnt while completing this task for you all and during this process. And it's good to have these realizations, and you can learn the same way too. We learn things by doing them, and the more tasks you write and the more realizations you have, the easier it's going to be for you to take the test. It's going to speed up your answers. It's going to result in much better results. And funny enough, earlier today I had another sort of realization along the same grounds. Let's take a look at that. Let me start this over. So I had this realization today when I looked at a student's task and assessed their task for them. And what they've done is they've written on the task, they've written on the chart, which is a really good idea, and they've put the trends in. This is great. The reason why I had this realization is that the candidate, the student, stuffed up these lines, and I've experienced this before. This happens a lot when I'm examining because of limited time pressure. When you have these lines and then you have this key over here with information, and then intersecting lines is very easy to get mixed up. So what the candidate did is they told me that first degrees were the highest, and they're not. They're clearly not. The highest, this is about salaries, so first degrees didn't, so that the candidate told me that first degrees had the highest level, and it's not the case. We can see the first degrees here. Okay, the highest one is this green one, which is other degrees. And actually it's not true for the whole period. At the end of the period, higher degrees were the highest. So essentially, if we want to write the overall summary about what's the highest, then we need to say that the highest was the others. Let me show you what I did, and then I'll explain the overall summary. So what I did is I put labels onto the chart. I've got the top line labeled as other degrees so that I won't make a mistake, so I won't stuff it up. And then higher degrees here, and then first degrees here. You could probably miss out this higher one. If you know what are the others and what's the first degrees, we can work that out. Okay, and then the overall summary, if we want to mention the overall summary in terms of what is the highest, for all of these age groups, the highest salaries were from this other category, except for the two oldest groups. And for the two oldest groups, it's not the others, it's this higher group. Okay, so by writing the titles of the categories, we can avoid mistakes. We can make it easier for ourselves. Avoiding mistakes means a higher score for task achievement. Making things easier means we can speed up our writing. We don't have to keep looking back here. We forget what the green one is and we have to look back here. Oh, it's the others. So we can save time, improve our accuracy, and avoid making big mistakes. If you've got any suggestions like this, please leave them in the comment box below. I'd be interested, and I'm sure other people could benefit greatly from them. If you found this video useful, please subscribe to me, and also you might like to check out my video on a Band 9 essay. I'm going to release this video in a couple of days, so make sure that you're subscribed and then you'll get an update as soon as I release this video. It's probably going to be on Saturday. As well as this, I'll put some links at the end of this video to some other videos that I've made that you might find useful. The other thing is, as I mentioned at the start of this video, if you'd like to see me make a video, then please put a comment and let me know. This would be really useful because I'm trying to make about 3 videos a week at the moment, and I could really use some ideas about what kind of videos you all would find useful. That's all from me today. This is Mike Wattie from IELTS Answers, giving you the answers you need to succeed in your IELTS test.